What's going on, YouTube? This is PescaroDB. Major 4 for the Call of Duty League is officially over. I just want to say, before we dive into this video, I really appreciate the Call of Duty League letting me be an official watch party host. But now, let's get right into the 5 things that we learned from Major 4. First and foremost, I think this one's probably obvious to everyone, and it's probably going to make a lot of people happy because most people are fans of these two teams. But our winner, the Los Angeles Thieves, and our runner-up or second place team, Optic Texas, they have set themselves apart as the two best teams in the league. You can argue, if you want to look at the scope of the entire year, you could argue, is Optic better than Thieves, or is Thieves better than Optic? They did just beat them twice head to head. Definitely something to consider with that argument. But overall, it's obvious that these two teams are just way above the others at the moment. I mean, FaZe would be the closest one in terms of being able to compete, and Optic was able to 3-0 them in winners finals. I've seen people putting out tier lists talking about, Optic and Thieves are in S tier, and they're just leaving A tier blank and then putting FaZe at the start of B tier. And I have to say I agree with that. FaZe obviously can take down most other teams with ease. Although, I mean, you do look at some of their series from this major, such as the one against NYSL. They did end up winning in 5 maps, but they very easily could have gotten swept in that series. To say that they should be above everyone else when they're hardly getting past some of those teams that are middle of the pack, I think that's not true. I think FaZe definitely is, I think there should be a split between where FaZe and the other teams are at, and then, nobody, and then Optic and Thieves, however you want to determine who's better between those two. I think this major and stage in general, stage 4, proved that those two teams are the top of the league right now, and they're playing some insane COD. Moving on to number 2, I wanted to talk about the viewership for stage 4 of the Call of Duty League. Obviously, this was an event where there was no fans, and I'm going to touch about that topic a little later, but viewership in general was technically down from the Major 3 event that we had about a month ago that was hosted by Optic Texas. But when you compare the year-over-year average from Major 4 this season and Major 4 in Vanguard, it is up a healthy percentage. And something that a lot of people are quick to forget is we are in the middle of NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, and the MLB season. A lot of people are watching that, and there's a lot of people, such as myself, I'm repping the Carolina Hurricanes, as you can see, that are fans of the NHL and the NBA, and they're watching their teams competing in the playoffs, and maybe they're not necessarily watching Major 4 for the CDL because their team's not playing it, or they just, they care to watch the traditional sports more. And the fact that viewership was still fairly high and didn't fall off a whole lot, I think that's something to be proud of, all things considered. Now, moving on to number 3, I think this one's a big one, and it honestly makes the upcoming Stage 5 and Major 5 very exciting to look at. Major 5 and Stage 5 in general are going to determine the fate of a large amount of teams in the Call of Duty League. So far, after Major 4, only 3 teams have officially qualified for champs in June, and that would be the Atlanta FaZe, Los Angeles Thieves, and Optic Texas. Everyone else technically has not qualified yet. It's very likely that Toronto Ultra and NYSL, the 2 other teams that have won majors this year, they're gonna qualify just based on winning a major alone. But you look at teams like Minnesota Rocker, the Vegas Legion, who are actually the hosts of champs. It's at UNLV, Boston Breach, Seattle Surge. There are a lot of teams in that 6 to 8 slot where things are up for grabs, and based on CDL points and just how these teams are currently playing at this part of the season, it's anyone's game, honestly, and it's going to be really fun to watch to see who is able to place into champs and earn their spot, and who just falls off and ends up having to watch from home. Obviously, it sucks for the teams that don't make it, but that's what a regular season is for. I know a lot of people complain because they're like, why do we have qualifiers and they're online? Like, why do they even matter? And the fact of the matter is, they matter because it helps you get better placement for the majors, and then that helps you get a better chance at winning the majors, which helps your chances of making champs. So I think people need to put a little more respect on those qualifier matches, even if they are online. That's the way it is. And Major 5 and Stage 5 is going to be one of the most exciting ones in CDL history, probably, just considering all the different scenarios that are at stake for these teams. Point number 4, I know this one is going to be controversial. A lot of people were not happy that the Major 4 took place in Columbus, Ohio at the Belong Arena or Belong Center, and there was no fans. It was on land. All the teams were there, but there were no fans allowed. There was no room for fans. And the sole reason for this was because originally at the beginning of the year, we were told that NYSL would once again be hosting Major 4, and something happened to where they ended up having to drop the event. They couldn't host anymore at their venue, and so the CDL was left with a tough choice, okay? Because people think it's as easy as you just call up a venue and you're like, hey, let's host an event. And they're like, yeah, sure, let's do it. Like, there's a lot of legal stuff that goes into it, and I know that's boring talk and it sounds like excuses, but it's true. And so the CDL was left with a choice. Do they put together a LAN event to at least allow the players to compete in person, as most people would demand for a major, or do they have Major 4 take place online, which hasn't happened since Black Ops Cold War, when COVID was still, a big deal and they weren't having in-person events. And the outrage from that would have been a lot worse if Major 4 this late in the year, after 3 events in person, if Major 4 then took place online, I mean, that would have been a nightmare. And then I could see why people were arguing. But they went with the best available option, which was to still have a LAN event for the major. It just turned out that they couldn't do it at a venue where fans could attend. And I know that sucks. Like, obviously no one's happy to see that, but I think people need to, pump the brakes a little bit with the whole, it's a $25 million buy-in league, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, I get it. And I know there's a lot of expectations and everyone wants to see the best possible event, especially considering, with FaZe, Optic, and Thieves being the top 3, that would have been an insane crowd for those final 2 matches, the losers finals and the grand finals. But the fact of the matter is they had to work with what they did, and I still think it was a great event from a competitive standpoint. Watching the teams play, it was all really fun. Seeing them get to actually talk trash right across the room from each other was also a really cool thing, because it's not quite the same at majors where there's been fans and stuff, because the stage is a little further spread. So even though they're yelling across at the others, they might not hear it as much, whereas they were right next to each other. They could clearly hear when they were talking trash. Actually, that's a good segue for our 5th topic from Major 4, which I wanted to point this out, is trash talk from players such as Draza, Scrap, and some of these other newer guys in the league. It's a great thing. A lot of people are going on Twitter and they're like, you have no reason to be talking. Why are you talking? You haven't proven anything. And first of all, for a player like Draza, the dude has won 3 majors now, including champs. He's won stuff in challengers. The dude is one of the more accomplished players in the CDL right now, and that's just a fact if you look at all the players that are currently playing. Sure, sometimes they get a little annoying and over the top, especially if you're not a fan of those players, of course, but trying to act like they shouldn't be trash talking, that's what makes the CDL and kind of esports in general fun, is it's not so uptight and oh, there's yes, they respect each other, and they all even if they're calling each other shit, at the end of the day, they're probably drinking at the bar near the hotel, hanging out. It's just part of the game. And I don't like that people cherry pick who's allowed to talk trash and who isn't. Because let's be real, one of the greatest trash talkers of all time is arguably the most loved player of all time, that being Scump. If people didn't fall in love with his trash talking and the way he'd get hyped up after big plays and big moments, he would have been nowhere near the level of success that he is today, even though he is no longer playing. You need those personalities in esports, and especially in Call of Duty, because it's just been like part of the history of it. And as long as like the trash talk doesn't get like personal, trash talk is a good thing, and it's great that we have some newer players that are willing to do that, because that's what's gonna keep the longevity of the competitiveness of the CDL. We love it, and it's something to look forward to. A question I wanted to pose following my 5 takeaways from Major 4. You can answer this in the comments, you can tweet me, we could do a whole other video on this topic. I just wanted to ask this. So the phase trio of Celium, Simp, and Abizi that formed at the beginning of the CDL going into MW 2019, they haven't placed worse than second at Champs. They got second at MW 19, they won Cold War, they got second at Vanguard, and so far this season, I don't believe they've placed out of the top 3 or 4, so it's likely they could end up at Champs, end up as a top 2 team. My question is, if they don't end up winning Champs, which at the moment, considering how well Optic and LA Thieves are playing, it's not looking good for them, is there a chance that Simp and Abizi and Celium, whether it's all of them or some combination, is there a chance they go their separate ways? I would love to hear what you have to think about this topic. I'd love to make a video diving into this, because they've been super successful. I'm not trying to like say like, oh, they're playing bad. Like, I'm not trying to take away from their success, but sometimes you get to a point where it's like you can't get over that hump again, and you think, you know what, maybe I need to go somewhere else. So let me know in the comments if you think that's a possibility in the off season, and let me know if I missed anything. I think these were the best takeaways that we got from Major 4. Until next time, I hope you have a fantastic day.